going on, friends? I want to talk to you today about why we see diseconomies of scale in the FedEx contractor business model. And a lot of times whenever I've worked with like private equity groups and other large business acquirers in the past, they like to think about having economies of scale. You buy more routes and hey, you've got more economies of scale, you can do things better. And that works when you're buying a true legitimate business. Now, not like FedEx routes are not legitimate, but they're not really a true independent business either. They're a contractual relationship. And so what happens is you get a lot of counterintuitive things that start to happen, like diseconomies of scale. So for you to understand this, we have to actually go back and look at the history of the contracts to see where that has brought us for today. So for example, back in the day, back in the olden days, 10, 15 years ago, what happened was you had something called a PSA, a primary service area. Now, a lot of people looking at evaluating deals currently are looking at something called a CSA, a contracted service area. Now, what's the difference and why does it matter? Well, it does matter. And so when we had those original PSAs, they were essentially like this designation of a single route. In other words, a truck and a driver paired up, they go out, they deliver packages. That was what was considered a route. And what happened was that FedEx says, hey, we want to reward people for getting larger. Now, larger means something different today than what it did before. Now, the average contractor probably has 10 to 15 routes. Back then, the average contractor basically had like one, maybe two routes. Again, truck and a driver dispatching. So only two drivers that they had under their, basically their management. So the point is that whenever those contracts went out, FedEx tried to encourage people to be larger, and larger was somewhere in that 5 route minimum. So what happened is that if you owned 2 routes, they would pay you an additional amount. Now, even if you did not have any additional packages, just for owning 2 routes, you got a bonus. And for owning 3, it got a little bit better. And 4 and 5 was kind of like the sweet spot. And then it increased all the way up to 10. And I'll show you the contract here in just a second on the screen. And you can see how it started to increase to basically different proportions as you got up to 10. Now, once you got up to 10, you got this massive bonus for having 10 PSAs. But once you went beyond that, let's say you got 20 PSAs. Well, there was no additional bonus. Now, why that matters is if you could think about going from 0 to 10 and 10 to 20, you would think it would double. And it doesn't quite double because going from 10 to 20 obviously is not getting you any additional bonuses. The only thing that you're getting additionally is more volume and more territory. Now, again, people think, well, that's good. That's what we're here for, right? Yeah, you are, but you're also here for all of the other reasons that FedEx pays you. And this is important in evaluating any particular deal with FedEx because it's not just about the territory. It's not just about the packages and the stops that you're running. It's about all the other reasons why FedEx is paying you. And sometimes people look at things like, for example, in today's contract, we see something called the service charge. Now, people look at that now and they say, oh, well, this is just some flat minimum amount that FedEx pays out in every single week of the contract until the contract ends. And people kind of think that this is a good thing. More money is better. It's not really better. A lot of times you want less of a service charge, but that gets into a whole other can of worms. The point is like, why did they pick this amount? Why did they pick $10,000 a week as opposed to $20,000 a week? What is this service charge? And why are they paying all these different things that aren't really necessarily 100% related to a specific package that I'm delivering? Well, it comes from all of this antiquated stuff that we don't even see anymore. And most people don't even know about because they haven't been around as long as I have doing this stuff. And the reality is that it comes from these old multiple PSA bonuses. And so, for example, the person that had 10 PSAs, whenever they converted over into the CSA sort of structure for those contracts, well, FedEx wanted to pretty much pay them about the same. So what happened was the guy that's getting paid, let's say $10,000 a week for his business, whenever it converts over to a CSA, was getting paid $10,000. And whenever the guy that's getting $20,000, of course, converts over. So why does this matter? Well, the issue is that what was happening is the guy that was at 10 PSAs and converted over, maybe his service charge, again, is sort of dictated in a way, among other sort of reasons why they're being paid, in a way to where they're basically getting that 10K. Now, if you use something that doesn't work, like margins, to be able to evaluate the financial aspects of this business, you could start to see why it's all jacked up. Because the guy with 10 PSAs originally versus the one with 20 PSAs, his margins look completely different from the 10 and 20. Well, why is that possible? Maybe this route's no good. Maybe this one's better. Maybe the broker says this or that. Who fucking cares? Because neither one of those things is relevant to be able to look at the margins versus the business itself. What matters is the business itself. How did the business come to be? From these old bonuses that have rolled over, and they have basically crept into the contract today, and they still exist. So the person with 10 PSAs that's now trying to sell their routes is, let's say essentially 10 routes and it's a CSA, well, his margins are probably going to look a lot better. And this is also why a lot of people didn't want to grow necessarily with FedEx, because it made sense to go up to 10 routes. But once you were beyond that 10 route or 10 PSA level, it's like, gosh, do I really want to put on another route and deal with more drivers and trucks and all these problems that can kind of come along with managing this business? Well, it made sense when I was getting these massive bonuses, but now the incremental amount isn't really worth it. So I'm not going to do it. And so it's like whenever you go out there and you look at these routes that are for sale on BizQuest or bizbuysell.com, it's like, a lot of these guys have 10 routes. Why is that? Why are these service charges different? Why don't margins really work? Why are they so across the board? Well, again, there's a lot of reasons why margins don't work, but the point is this is just one of the very, very many reasons why we see margins not an effective way to evaluate a route all on their own. So the point is that when you can see these diseconomies of scale, hopefully you could start to see that there are some very counterintuitive aspects to this business and evaluating this business that don't translate into a typical business that you would be buying, where you almost always have economies of scale. In this case, the more you grew, the less money you made incrementally, and it didn't even make sense, and a lot of people didn't want to grow beyond that 10 route level. Now, again, things have changed over the last several years to be able to, where these sorts of things have sort of been absorbed into the CSA contract structure at this point. But I promise you, these antiquated things are still in there. They still reside in that contract. They're just hidden. They are renamed into other things like service charge and large package mix percentage and so on and so forth. So it doesn't mean that those things don't matter. And it doesn't mean that the PSA is always going to be around or something like that. It's clearly not. It's done. But the point is that when you start to see these little small, intricate things that have happened in the historical contracts, you can understand where you are today, and you can also understand the issues on why margins don't work, and then you can also understand why there are certain sweet spots in the FedEx world where you want to be able to maximize how much income and net income that you're actually generating versus how much time, effort, energy, stress, risk, all those other sorts of things that go along with owning this business. So anyway, hopefully this helps out give you a little bit extra perspective on the history of FedEx, as well as where we are and maybe where we're going. So anyway, take care. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.